They're not just sitting there waiting to be called up. So on the ground, the problem we have, and it's been around for weeks now, is but just average folks. We've had one person is now dead because ICE shot that person. They lied about why they shot him. We now know. And we also have a second shooting. So we have a person dead. We have another person who's in the hospital. Her attorney this morning came out and said exactly the opposite of what the ICE spokesperson said about what happened, and that is the attorney says that there is body cam footage of the ICE official agent ramming her vehicle, yelling at her, using the B word to describe her, and then shooting ensued. So we don't know all the facts. I haven't seen any of that footage, but those are just examples. We've had a lot of brutality. Maybe some of you have seen it, but we're taking them to court wherever we can. We've got a lot of protesters standing up to them, and I'm encouraging everybody, bring your phones, take a lot of footage, because it is helping us to take them to court and, offering evidence to the judges.
You've also said that you would, along with all the legal proceedings, you would deploy the Illinois State Police, which you control. How would you use them? I mean, could you arrest federal officials, or what is that?
No, we have actually deployed Illinois State Police. And by the way, these are incredibly well-trained police. They're very good at their jobs. These are not hacks, or I don't know what people have an image of, but I can tell you these are excellent police officers. We deployed them to the area where there's an ICE facility, where there are 2 blocks of protesters. And what we wanted to do, here's what was happening. We had peaceful protesters showing up, and they were getting pelted by ICE standing on top of their buildings, firing gas pellets. These are things that hit you, and it's like getting hit with a tear gas grenade, except it doesn't land on the ground and fill with smoke. It lands on you, and it's smoke that's coming out of you at the time you get hit, not to mention rubber bullets. So we wanted to make sure that we were protecting the protesters. So we brought in, at the request of local Broadview police. By the way, Broadview is a suburb of Chicago. Anybody that tells you that, that ICE is in Chicago only is not telling the truth. They're actually all over the suburbs and in the city. But Broadview's a 8,000 person population suburb of Chicago. They have 31 total officers in their police department. That's for 21 shifts a week, right? So not a lot of people. They needed help, so we organized a central command, essentially, bringing Cook County sheriffs as well as the Illinois State Police to assist them. So we're protecting the protesters. We want peaceful protests and nothing more than that. And so far, it is working the way that we kind of had hoped it would. But we don't know what's going to happen with National Guard, and we're hopeful that the judge will rule in our favor.
I'm struck by the fact that you said that you hadn't communicated with the White House. I'm wondering if either one of you, have any communication with the White House, if you talked to Governor Abbott, it's the Texas National Guard, if you talked to Pete Hegseth, any of these sort of officials who are overseeing this, and whether you have an open line of communication with the White House.
So they sent all these folks, the ICE and CBP, and now National Guard, without talking to me at all. They have not picked up the phone and called me, not once. On Saturday, for the first time, I got a notice that Pete Hegseth was going to call me to let me know they're calling up the Illinois National Guard. And that is normally how it's done. They either call you or notify you some other way. But I was told he's going to call, and I thought, great, first time in literally a couple months now that I would have heard from somebody at the White House about their mission. So I was told they were going to call. I literally canceled everything that I had that afternoon to make sure that I was there with my phone, no interruptions, waiting for that call. He never called. And it turns out he was at a football game and was part of some push-up competition at a football game, and left the governor of the state that he's sending troops to, waiting by the phone. I never got a call from Pete Hegseth or anybody else.
Do you talk to the White House, Governor?
No, but I think for the moment here, can we all just, as you heard this from the governor of Illinois, can we all just acknowledge that none of this is normal? And don't try and, you're getting You're getting straight answers and you're hearing this. This is not normal, and this is not to set up something that's peripheral to this. If it's about, helping us out on, an event that comes up, helping us out on crime or whatever it might be, none of this is it. Not coordinating with the governors, no, we do not hear from them. And in fact, the communication lines that are set up and very specific in this are codified into law with the Council of Governors. Governor Pritzker said on that, I said on that, appointed by President Trump to set on that. And it's codified into law that you have to have these communications. You have to communicate on budget. And it just makes sense that if you're going to do an operation where people have firearms, you need to know where folks are at, how they're going to be positioned, how they're going to be used. And none of that is happening because none of this is truly about providing safety or security or augmenting the force that's already there. It's about a photo opportunity. So no. And the way this lack of communication goes, this in a crisis situation where you need to have that communication, just day-to-day things. One of the things that we always had very good communication with the Secretary of the VA as VA issues would come up. And we have, of course, the premier hospital here in Minneapolis. And we have an incredible hospital administrator that I have personally talked to hundreds of times and called up when things are happening. They are now forbidden from talking to state government. We have to go through governmental affairs at the White House, set up a meeting, and they're telling us those are at least 6 weeks before you can get one of those. So no, there's no communications. There's no attempt to work with this. There's no attempt to understand what's on the ground. And everyone knows this. You're a Texas National Guardman teaching school one day, running your auto shop, small business owner or whatever. You're called up. Now all of a sudden you're in a place where you've never been. You're on the streets of a city you've never been, and you're being asked to carry out a mission that is so nebulous no one knows exactly what it is. That is a recipe for disaster, not for order.
And just let me add one more thing, which is Tim's right. The local law enforcement are not being informed of any of it. So imagine you've got people with automatic weapons that are running around in Chicago and in the suburbs, and no one in the Chicago Police Department or any of the suburban police departments or Cook County Sheriff are being told anything about their operations. And so you have people calling 911 and saying, there's an unmarked vehicle with somebody with a mask that's trying to break into a house. Who is that? I mean, these days it's always ICE. But I'm talking about in the last bunch of weeks. But imagine if you're a local police officer, what are you supposed to do in those situations? So it's deeply concerning. We don't know exactly where this is going to end. What we know is that it is striking fear in the hearts of everybody in Chicago. And we have residents. It's not just, this isn't just about undocumented people. This is, U.S. citizens who are brown or black are being stopped only for that reason and asked for identification that proves that they're a U.S. citizen. I don't know about you. Anybody in this audience have proof that you're a U.S. citizen on you? Because none of us, your driver's license is not proof. So none of us walk around with it. And think about the last time you can remember a regime that asked people for their papers to prove who they are because, the police on the streets, told you had to. So that's what we're turning into in this country.
So Governor Walz, you said this is not normal.
No.
You were in the National Guard for 24 years. You worked on the Insurrection Act, right?
Yes.
Updating it as a member of
Yes.
Congress. Is this an abuse of power by the president?
Well, yes, and for all of you to know that Insurrection Act they keep talking about, this is 1807 Insurrection Act, and the idea that the president could evoke exceptional powers to use federal troops. It's been done at times. It was done with the Little Rock Nine, a little bit different use of that. And the reason I got involved with this was in the early Gulf War, after 9/11, the use of the National Guard, and I think a lot of people viewed the National Guard as a strategic reserve that would be used if everybody else was used up. Well, that wasn't the case. They became an operational force that was integrated in. But what happened in these multiple deployments was we were using the Guard so much that the Guard has a dual mission. Their Title 10 is federal, Title 32 is state. We use them for firefighting. We use them for COVID. We used them to run in nursing homes when we needed to backfill. So there's many missions that the governors are counting on to be able to use this, and no one was coordinating on how this was done. Now, it came to a head when it looked like it might be used during Hurricane Katrina, because the last time it was used is the riots in Rodney King in '92. So George Bush was talking about using it when Governor Blanco in Louisiana, they were trying to say, how did you get control after Katrina? It was not invoked, but there was an attempt by that White House to try and use it. So Tom Davis and myself, Republican from Virginia, put an amendment in making sure it was difficult to invoke that act, and especially against American citizens. Take it one more step to 2010. On the Armed Services Committee, I passed a resolution that in the National Defense Authorization Act, we created the Council of Governors. 5 Democratic governors, 5 Republican governors appointed by the president, and then our counterparts in the agencies, FEMA, Department of Defense, and so forth, that required budgeting decisions and use of the National Guard in natural disasters, man-made disasters, or times of civil unrest, that there would be coordination on how that was done. I was on that. President Trump appointed me to that, the same as he did with Governor Pritzker and our Republican colleagues. And I will tell you, that worked really well. And it made Article 10, states' rights, a priority. For example, the Biden administration, in my opinion and my 49 fellow governors' opinion, did an overreach when they tried to pull the Space Force out of the National Guard and centralize it.
Right.
So I, as the co-chair, along with Phil Scott from Vermont, coordinated the National Governors Association to get all 50 governors to sign on, sent a letter to the Biden White House and said, your Secretary of the Air Force is overreaching, stand down. And they did. And
it was a
now we're
letter
hearing-
that's specific, if I may say,
Yeah.
you know, thank God you did that. It was a letter that specifically said that the president has very limited ability to call out the National Guard in our states, and we needed to acknowledge that. Every governor signed on. When I say every governor, I mean Greg Abbott in Texas.
Big signature.
And
So
exactly, and then here he is now. Here he is now sending his National Guard or acquiescing to Donald Trump calling out his National Guard. I have to say one other thing. You know, please take note. When Donald Trump says that, you know, it's a hellhole in Chicago, when he says that there's crime rampant across Chicago or Illinois, it's a complete BS. Number one, we're in the top half of states, 19th, in terms of safety, 19th. Right, so we're in the top half of states. Like there's a whole bunch of states that are much worse than we are,
like Texas,
for violent crime, like Texas, and Chicago is not in the top 25 or 30 cities in terms of violent crime. So you know, and look at who's at the top. By the way, several cities in Florida, several cities in Texas, but he doesn't talk about any of those places. He only talks about sending them to Portland, to L.A., to Washington D.C., to Chicago. What do they all have in common?
So why do you think he does that? What are you saying? Let's make it clear.
Aside from the fact that he's out of his mind and has dementia, it's clear to me that he is targeting Democratic cities, blue cities, and especially blue cities in blue states. That there are blue cities in red states, but he's targeting blue cities in blue states, and particularly blue governors, Democratic governors. I believe that there is a much more nefarious reason that he is not stating, which is he wants us all in big cities to get used to the idea that it's okay to have military on the streets. Why? Because next year there's an election, and he's going to leave a lot of these folks in place. And when we have elections, because he threatened this in 2020, number one, he's going to guard the polling places, so you're going to see soldiers outside your polling place. That's going to intimidate a lot of people, and especially it's going to intimidate people who are not Republicans. And it's also going to intimidate. It's also going to intimidate people afterward. When more than intimidate, Michael Flynn in 2020 said that he should confiscate the ballot boxes in order to count the ballots himself. I believe that was when he said, stop the steal, count the ballots themselves. So what I think is they are planning to do is to get ready to do something like that if he is not winning the Congress in 2026.
So I was going to ask you, both of you, what the worst case scenario is for all of this. I'm sure you sort of think this through. That's your jobs, to think through things like that.
I hope that was it.
I was wondering if that's it. Did you just lay it out, or
more.
you think there could be?
I don't know. I don't think I'm paranoid. I definitely. I was saying to Tim earlier that I'm not a conspiracy theory guy, so it's unusual for me to say something like what I just said. But I think you could piece all that together, because remember, they also called for all 50 states, the DOJ called for all 50 states to deliver their voter rolls. Why? They haven't told us why, but we know. What they're looking for is an excuse to say that there's fraud in the election in 2026. That is the real purpose. So put all those things together. That is what I think is really going on.
So we are sitting, of course, in a blue city, in a blue state. So do you anticipate that the National Guard will come here?
Yeah.
And
yes.
are you preparing for that?
Yes, we are, and we have been for quite some time. Look, I was saying in January.
When did you start preparing?
Pardon me?
When did that preparation, when did you start thinking about that?
Well, I think prior to last year, we started thinking about what would happen, and governors were talking together about what the implications would look like. I don't think I was overreaching when I told people. I was told in January that I was overreacting, and I made the case that I think if you can anticipate what they will do, they are going to do it. And I don't think Governor Pritzker has spoken out of turn on what we're seeing develop and the way that they've talked about it. I think it makes it would be logical for them to come here. We fall into exactly what it looks like they're trying to target, blue cities in places that he wants to make an impact. You can certainly chill voting in states like Minnesota if you target Minneapolis and St. Paul. I think the biggest thing is that you're hearing here is you have two governors. Our job is not to do immigration enforcement. We work and do our work. Our job is not. We're supporters and partners when our guard's used for national security, specifically outside the country. Our job is to make sure our schools are funded. Our job is to make sure we're making life more affordable. Our job is to talk about housing and child care. Our job is to make sure, as they did in Illinois and Minnesota, our kids are eating. All of those things are things we should be doing that aren't doing. But I think the preparation is to learn from this. I think the courts are still holding, and you're seeing the courts where we're able to bring these temporary restraining orders against them. But again, none of this is about to, and again, it's not a distraction, and none of us are saying we shouldn't be addressing crime no matter what our statistics are on that, but there are specific ways to do that with the professionals. Simultaneously, as they're shifting all these resources to this immigration and intimidation campaign, it's pulling resources from other things that we could use with them. They pulled out some of the counterterrorism dollars, some of the things that we could actually be using. So we're preparing for it. We're preparing to use the courts. We're preparing to follow all the laws as they're written, to challenge them on this. But I think it's really important for the citizens to see this is not normal. And again, it's the false tyranny. Do you want to see crime stop? Yeah. Well, sending in the National Guard, who are, fighter pilots, artillerymen like myself or whatever, is not the same as adding more trained police officers who have the authority to be, and separating the idea of federal military control of American cities versus civilian control, who are responsible to mayors, city councils, governors, not the President of the United States. And I keep saying this. You do your job and we'll do ours. And the fact of the matter is, we're doing ours. I don't have to remind you, the government is shut down while Nero golfs or fiddles. And that is not the way this is supposed to work. So yes, we're preparing for it. But the challenge for governors is we have to simultaneously deliver and do the services. And right now, there's no desire at the federal government to do that. They're not fulfilling their obligations. They're not getting the work done. They're not doing any of that. They're focusing on these issues.
You both have spent years of your lives, raised millions of dollars for the Democratic Party, spent years, devoted to the Democratic Party. Do you think you are getting enough support from your fellow Democrats, both in Chicago and as you try to do your work here? And, in terms of your laying out, what you're really laying out is an emergency situation. Do you think the party is doing enough to tackle this?
Well, look,
I stare at each other.
Yeah, I saw that look.
We got a pool going. Who gets arrested first? And I don't know who's. I don't know who's leading.
Yeah.
No, look, I think people are trying to respond to this. This is maybe Newsom. So.
But do you think you're getting enough support?
Everybody's trying to figure this out and trying to govern and trying to react to this new reality. And the bar just keeps pulling down. The bar just keeps changing on this. Again, I ask all of you to please do, I hear President Obama does this a lot. Imagine a Democratic president sending the Illinois National Guard to rural Texas because we don't like the way things are going. It's the argument I keep making that one of the strongest Second Amendment arguments that Second Amendment adherents said was we need to keep our firearms to protect against the tyrant of a federal government in our cities. I guess, I don't know. So I think people are trying to adjust to this. They're trying to get it done. I get asked questions, should you keep your head low? Are you making Minnesota a target? you make us a target if we acquiesce to what is not normal and what is moving towards authoritarianism. If I disagree with his tax policies, that's a very different thing.
But you don't think there's any...
And so I think resistance is hard. I want to tell you, I keep hearing this, is the Democratic Party doing enough? The fix to this is the conservative Republican business party that always operated there needs to stand up and say, this is not who we are. This was the party of states' rights. This was the party of low federal interaction into our communities. These were the folks that were talking about law and order, not outside of this. And these were the folks that said no more wars. I heard him to say no more wars also meant here, too. No more wars in America. And so I want to make the case on this. Can the Democratic Party do more? Yes. Look, I'm Exhibit A. Had we done more last fall, we wouldn't be in this situation. So I'll acquiesce to that. We need to figure that piece out. But right now, as it stands, we just need a half dozen Republican senators to stand up and say, enough is enough, follow the law. Taking our money, like pulling money that was authorized, appropriated, and given to the states because you don't want us, as we already made plans to move towards the most renewable energy grid to lower prices for Minnesotans. Now they're taking our money back, and it's incredibly disruptive. So I think there's more we can do, but I think you're kidding yourselves if you think that the Democrats are just going to come up with a slogan that this is unfair, Donald Trump should quit it. He's not going to quit it. The way it's done is the folks that are nearest to him say, this is not how things are done in America. And you think he's kidding when he talks about wanting to run again? You think he built a ballroom so that, J.B. Pritzker, when he moves in, can have that ballroom? So, no, he built it for himself. So,
I mean, are you optimistic Republicans are going to do that?
I am more hopeful than you think, because I think what I hear, and maybe Governor Pritzker could talk about this, what I hear away from the cameras and away from others is also a reasonableness from folks. And I will say that here and give kudos to the folks here. We have the most evenly divided legislature in the country, and Republicans and Democrats got to the table and passed a budget together, compromised. Most of us, we didn't get what we wanted. We didn't get it all. They did it. They did it. And I don't want to normalize and say, well, everybody should just get along. There's some people you can't get along with. And I think that's the problem that I have, that there's no way what I say if Donald Trump's going to listen to it. But I would say, as Governor Pritzker said, if Governor Abbott said, I got to tell you, Mr. President, this is wrong, and I don't want you to send Texas National Guard troops to Illinois. That's all he has to say. And that changes this entire dynamic. But he didn't say it.
Or just hold up the letter that he signed last year.
Yeah, that.
To hand that to the president. In answer to your question, I will say, I think there are too many elected leaders in the Democratic Party who think that we're in some slightly abnormal world, but they think that there are guardrails and that somehow we'll get through this and then we'll just, fix it. And the reality, I don't know, I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but I can tell you that I sat alongside Holocaust survivors for 10 years to build the Illinois Holocaust Museum. And one thing that I learned from them is that you can't wait. When you are fighting, tyranny, and that is what we're talking about here, that you have to stand up and speak out. They insisted in building this museum that when we talk to particularly young people, and that's really what this museum is mostly about, when we talk to young people, they say, we've got to challenge young people who come into the museum to ask themselves, who are you? Are you a collaborator? Are you a bystander? Are you a rescuer? Or are you an upstander? An upstander being something even more than a rescuer, somebody who's willing to stand up and speak out. You might rescue too, but it's speaking out at a moment when it might be perilous to do so. That doing that has the biggest positive effect. And I think that is a question that everybody's got to ask themselves, but especially Democrats who are willing to ask themselves that question. Because I think most people want to be upstanders. Most people want to do the right thing. And this is the moment. It was easy, when things were easy. It's not easy now to choose to be an upstander, but this is exactly the moment for people to stand up. And do I see enough people doing it? No, I don't. And I'm surprised. I'll be honest, I'm surprised. I thought that by March or April, that we would have seen more and more leaders And I'm talking about business leaders and university leaders, as well as, Democratic leaders. Just folks. I thought more people would be standing up and speaking out. And yes, we've got No Kings rallies, and there's a woman. I just want to tell you a quick story about a woman in Southern Illinois, in Edwardsville, Illinois. 28,000 people in Edwardsville. This woman in February looked at what Donald Trump was doing already and could not stand it and didn't know what to do. And Edwardsville is generally in an area that's red and votes Republican. But she was outraged by what Trump was doing. Even then, she didn't know what to do, and so she made a sign, and protesting. And she went and stood at the at the intersection of two state highways, and held up a sign protesting by herself. Somebody came by with their dog and said, "What are you doing?" She said, "Well, I'm just outraged. This is what I can do." And the person stood there with her that day. And then the next day, 4 of her friends showed up. And then the next day, 8 people showed up. And now every Friday since then, about 200 to 300 people show up to protest in that location. I think first of all, that gives me hope. But second, I would like it to be 1,000 people. I would like it that if people would show up all the time, and it means doing anything and everything, social media, write a letter, show up at the Republican congressman's office and ask him why he voted for that big ugly bill that's going to take away your rural health care. I mean, everything you can do right now is the moment to be the upstander.
Well, I think some of it, particularly for the business leaders, the university leaders, is fear, right?
Of course.
The president has been very open about his desire to target those he perceives as political enemies. Do you both think you're on that list? And do you think about that?
They published one last week.
Yeah, they did. Yeah. And we both are on that list, yeah.
Yeah.
And here's what I have to say. I was on the top, and W comes after Pritzker. I don't know why alphabetically. Yes, I absolutely believe this, but this is true of all these autocrats. This is not a new playbook or whatever. No. The thing that I think we have to keep in mind is that they are not strong, they're weak, and that's why they're doing this. And you see this across time, and you watch these documentaries, always wondering what it looked like as you slipped away from democracy to more autocratic government, but how quickly you slip back, you can switch from, and they usually don't come without some struggle in them, but there are those times when we switch back. I can still remember in that fall of '89 when the Berlin Wall fell, and many of us who grew up in that, all of a sudden it was there and then it was gone. And then we had a reunified Germany, we had a movement towards that. So it's there, and I would just encourage people, this is the time. Are they going to target you? Yes. And should we keep our heads down? So here's what I think, just to be honest with you. You know that this big ugly bill that decimated healthcare, and then afterwards they heard so much blowback, especially around rural healthcare, and there's mostly a lot of rural members that are in the Congress because that's our divide in this country, rural-urban. Those rural members said, you got to do something, so he put in $50 billion. What do you think the chance that Illinois and Minnesota are going to get their share of that $50 billion as opposed to North Dakota and South Dakota? And, that's where we're at now. So we have to go bend the knee to get our tax dollars back in a system that's set up to be run by laws.
And by the way, the cuts were $150 billion, but they made this whole fund of $50 billion and said, see, we're giving money to rural hospitals.
But you joked about who's going to be arrested first. Do you both believe that you could sincerely be arrested?
Yes.
I'm asking any of you to come visit me in the gulag in El Salvador.
Yes, I think in all seriousness, yes. You saw the thing with James Comey.
It sounds like,
You see the same with James Comey. You see the representative who went to a detention facility, member of Congress, and look, they drug Governor Pritzker, myself, and Governor Hochul of New York in front of Congress. And I said, I don't think people notice this, the decorum of being a former member of Congress, which Governor Hochul and I were, but 3 sitting governors, 2 of them former members of Congress, being brought back to testify in front of Congress. I'm not sure, and I should go look this up or whatever, but the decorum is you would never swear in those governors because it's the respect given to someone who served in that institution. And not only did they swear us in, they spent the time belittling on things that had nothing to do with why they're there. So yes, I think it's how easy, and I have not seen any. Again, where are the Republican dissenters? And again, this example that the governor gave, Governor Abbott and all of the Republican governors were 100% on board that Joe Biden was misusing the National Guard by transferring the Space Force out of the National Guard into the active force. And by doing so, they made it clear that they believed in states' rights. They believed that we should do this together, and now they're perfectly silent. So this whole thing is well, you know, kind of both sides do it. They do not. I, as the co-chair of the Council of Governors, chastised a Democratic president because it was an overreach of where the states should have been responsible, and now we hear nothing. With that being the case, are they going to stand up for us? These are folks, my friends. I will say this. There was one member of Congress that day who said, I know the governor. I was friends with him. I disagree on this. A Republican member said that. He said, but I won't say anything here because it's not the right thing to do. I'll talk to him offline. So I hold out some hope, but unless they speak up. And again, if you think you're getting out of this, it's that old adage. They're going to come for immigrants. They're going to come for the Democrats. They're going to come for you eventually. So just your time will come.
But I want to point out, and you know, in private, there are some Republicans in our legislature who are actually, you know, decent and will talk to me, and they don't like Trump. They're concerned about where the future is. They won't say any of that publicly, of course. And the real test of that was that there was, you know, when CBP and ICE showed up in Chicago, they brought with them right-wing social media influencers with cameras, right? I mean, literally had them embedded with them. So, but one of them came to my house and filmed in front of my house, essentially calling me the enemy and telling people that I'm the cause of, this was around the Charlie Kirk murder, and that I'm the cause of political violence, or I'm the cause of Charlie Kirk's murder. And doing that in front of my house. And so right after that occurred, and it appeared online on his social media, I called the leaders of the Republicans in the legislature, and I said to them, I hope that you will speak out against this, that you will say something. This is wrong. This is wrong. And if it were happening in front of your house, if it was the opposite, and it was happening in front of your house, and someone essentially threatened you or created a situation where other people might attack you, that, you know, that we Democrats would, I would stand up for you. I hope you would stand up for me. Neither one of them. I asked them simply to post something publicly or put a statement out, anything. It seems like just common decency to just say this is wrong. And they wouldn't do it. And there's so much fear among Republicans in particular, and it shouldn't be that there are Democrats that are afraid, because you know what? We're the targets. We need to be strong. We need to fight back, and there needs to be more of it.
I think the other reason, though, some Democrats are more quiet, perhaps, is because of the election, right? They're trying to game this out politically. What do you guys think the outlook will be for Democrats politically next year? You're both running for third terms.
Yeah, well, I think in any normal world, when you've got the soybean markets collapsing, you have folks deeply concerned. We are losing jobs. We'll never know for sure because we just get rid of the folks who measure those things at the Bureau of Labor Statistics. You see an economy that's fragile. You see our allies deeply concerned. You see, you know, continuous disruptions. Usually what happens in that is people go out and vote the other way. I think Governor Pritzker made the point on this is there's a reason that they're gerrymandering Texas is that they're going to lose the House. That is going to happen. So you got to try to game the system. There's a reason that they want to make it harder to vote by mail because a lot of Democrats like to vote by mail because it's more efficient and works. So I believe we're going to win, but I think it's going to be closer than it should be because of the thumb on the scale. I think it's critical that we do win so that there is a check and balances that goes into that. But I would go back to J.B. saying this is that we need, you know, Republicans, not elected Republicans, old school Republicans out there who recognize, when did you think it was okay for the United States government to own U.S. Steel? When did you think it was okay to have a command economy where the government owns this? You know, all this screaming about us being socialists, for God's sakes, this guy is the most successful socialist president we've seen in buying up businesses and controlling that. And imagine as a governor, if I would threaten an individual business like we see by this because they don't adhere to the things that I want, it's unheard of. And I think we get so comfortable in here trying to, you know, I got to be fair, I got to manage this out or whatever. There's no fairness to that. And so I think watching the election is going to be a real challenge because there's going to be a tendency, as JB said, well, this is just a normal election we got going on here. You know, and we got to just kind of make sure we're fair. We're giving too much, you know, positive to this side. We get over here. So I think we'll win, but I think it's going to be a challenge. I think the environment is really tough, and I think there is a cynicism of the both sidesism. And again, in owning some of this, we got to give people a reason that we're not just opposed to this guy because he's awful on this. We've got some real solutions for things like housing. We got some real solutions for things like childcare. We got some real solutions around energy costs and renewables, and really get those out there. And I would make the case that Kamala Harris did that last year, pointing out very clearly that Project 2025 was real when he told us he didn't know about it. We knew he was, but also talked about $25,000 down payment assistance for housing, home care, using Medicaid. Instead of cutting Medicaid, we use Medicaid to allow home care for our parents and make life easier for all of us. Those were things that were out there. We have to focus simultaneously on both. And that's going to be a challenge.
Was there something you think Democrats didn't understand in that race about the politics of the Midwest? You're both Midwestern governors. They lost that blue wall. You lost that blue wall states.
You want me to offer criticism of our national ticket?
Well, not criticism, reflection.
You can write a book.
Some time has passed.
Yeah.
Perhaps everyone's done a little soul searching.
Look, I think elections are honestly about
Democrats
things
missed
that
about
are.
the Midwest.
I think the elections in general are about the kitchen table issues. I mean, the things that matter to people every day. I've often said, especially recently, that this election coming up is not going to be about democracy. It just isn't. It wasn't going to be in 2024 either. I was critical, actually, when Joe Biden was still the candidate and he gave a speech in Valley Forge. I publicly criticized him, but I didn't go to that speech. I was invited, didn't go, because I knew it was a speech about democracy. It was a terrific speech, and he's right about everything he said. The thing is, he wanted to make that the theme of his campaign. And I've knocked on a lot of doors and asked people to vote for me or for other people. And I can tell you that if I knocked on 100 doors, 5 people would tell me that democracy is the most important issue to them. Right. Everybody else will tell you it's about paying the bills, the electric bills, it's about the grocery prices, it's about putting your kid through college or making sure they get a good job, or you yourself getting a better job and a better wage. That is what people really care about. I mean, I hate that we have to talk about democracy, but for God's sakes, we're not going to win an election if there is no election. And so we got to fight to preserve democracy in order to win the election. And what we ought to be talking about, Tim just said it, it's about, can you afford the things that really matter in your life? And if you can't afford an apartment, if you can't afford a house, if you can't afford your groceries, nothing else really matters. I mean, quick story, I went to Argentina when I was young. I was about 23. I was working on Capitol Hill for a really great United States senator. And I got invited on this trip that was half Democrats, half Republicans, to learn about Argentina's political system. It was a democracy at the time. And we landed in Buenos Aires, and immediately there was a military coup. I didn't cause it, I promise. But we landed, and we went to the hotel where we were staying, and we were watching on TV, on CNN, everything that was happening in Argentina, and it was a little scary, but we had to take a vote, by the way, between Democrats and Republicans, all of us together. Were we going to go to the embassy and wait it out? Or were we going to go into the streets where there was going to be a democracy rally? Well, the vote was all the Republicans voted to go to the embassy. All the Democrats voted to go rally in the streets. I tell you this story because when we went to the rally in the streets, and we all did, we found a place that was a little above this is the Plaza de Mayo in Buenos Aires, and there were hundreds of thousands of people there. And people were, chanting, and they were, standing up for democracy, and they had big banners standing up for their political parties and so on. And in the middle of all of it, there was a guy pushing an ice cream cart, selling popsicles and ice cream. You know what? He almost didn't care what kind of a government there was, because he had to take money home to put food on the table. And I take the lesson from that a little bit is, it's not that he didn't care, it's that his number one priority was making sure that he could feed his family. And that, I think, is a good lesson for today, for every day, about winning elections. We need to be talking about and focused on affordability. And Tim and I both, I've looked at his record. This man has delivered for Minnesota. And I'm so proud to be his friend. And we together in our respective states, I think we've done a whole lot of things for working people, for middle class, for vulnerable people in our states, because that's who we are as Democrats. And we need to show that and make sure that everybody knows that we deliver. And in Washington, D.C., shutdown is a great example. Nothing's happening, right? And we really haven't seen much action for working people for too many years from Washington, D.C. Democrats in the states, in my view, are actually delivering, and we need to show that off to bring back the Democratic
The
Party.
governor
sure
did a great job
sounded-
of this. What he explained to you was, teachers in this room know, it's Maslow's hierarchy. And Democrats get stuck on self-actualization. You need to solve climate change, but you can't worry about climate change if you can't pay the bills. And they have to go hand in hand, so he's not wrong. I would just say on this, the conversation we had here, this is not going to win the election, but it is certainly going to motivate a base to get out there. So I think JB's exactly right. We have to be able across the spectrum to make the case about democracy, but you can't lead with it. It's got to be the others.
That sounded awfully like a campaign speech.
I'm
You've
running for
said
re-election,
You're running
Lisa.
for re-election. You're
Yes.
both running for re-election.
Yes.
You've said that if you get elected to a third term, you won't run for president
That's
again in
right.
28. Is that true? That
That's
holds
true. I will visit J.B. Pritzker when he
And
is
will
there.
and Governor Pritzker, will you make a similar promise?
Whatever I
Don't do
decide,
it.
whatever I decide, honestly, is going to be about what I think is best for the people of Illinois and nothing else. I love the job that I have. I do. Being governor of Illinois, I wouldn't be running for a third term if I didn't. I also am running for a third term, I think maybe similar to Tim, although should speak for himself, because I do not feel like I can abandon the people of my state in this moment, especially with Donald Trump as president, with this MAGA Congress. Someone's got to stand up for the people of Illinois, and I feel like I have the experience to do that, and I've accomplished a lot for them, and I believe I can protect people mostly from what is coming down from the MAGA Congress and Donald Trump's presidency.
So this conversation, we're sort of winding down. It certainly was pretty dark at times. And I'm just reminded about how 14 months ago you were running a campaign of joy. It was sort of peak joy. Where is the joy in politics in October 2025? Is there any joy?
Yes.
Yes? Where is it?
Yes, I was up at the Capitol this morning, and as I said, our allies are still there. Norway is still with us. They're leading on climate initiatives. They're leading on, Crown Prince Haakon is big on nutrition for children around the world. Norway has been incredibly generous. And we were there with a bunch of school children who came up and stopped. And watching our allies from Norway talk to Minnesota school children is there, see them at their Capitol learning. And I say this, at a Capitol experienced a lot of sorrow this year, and a place that I still feel that sorrow every single day when I go up there on the second floor. But our children are the hopefulness, the ability for us to be able to do it. This is our responsibility. I always wondered when I was growing up, who were the people who walked across the Edmund Pettus Bridge? Who were those people who did it? And you know, for the most part, who they were? They were school kids in a lot of cases, people like John Lewis who were doing that. So this generation is full of people like that. And we will get through this. I'm not whistling past the graveyard, but we're not going to get through it if we pretend like all this is okay and all this is normal. We get through it when we stand up for human rights. We get through it when we stand up and know our children deserve better. And I have to believe at the end of the day, Bruce Springsteen said it, it is no sin to be glad you're alive. We can find joy in these moments, and we should. So.
And you, Governor, as you prepare to head back to Chicago, any joy in politics these days
All right,
for
you just took all the joy out. No,
I'm sorry.
you know, it's not heading back to Chicago. By the way, Chicago just got named the best big city in America by Condé Nast. Today, while Donald Trump is sending troops to Chicago, okay? But here's the joy, in my view. You know, when I took over as governor, I took over from a Republican governor in Illinois who really had destroyed state government and our budget, and we couldn't afford to have a governor like that, but that's what happened. And so, you know, we plunged to, 50th in credit rating, no balanced budget. In fact, he left me with $17 billion of overdue bills to have to pay off, in addition to balancing a budget that hadn't been balanced for more than 20 years. I give you that as precursor to, look, we've solved a lot of problems. We have a lot more to do. There's a lot more to do, but we've made a whole ton of progress. And the joy for me is waking up every day knowing that I can make a difference in people's lives. So at least for me, as somebody who's running for re-election, I know that I can make a difference in people's lives. And I know I'm focused on the right people, the most vulnerable, our working class, and our middle class. That's what I do every single day. Look, wealthy people, great. They're going to be fine. They're going to be fine. But standing up for people who just need a little bit of a hand up, that's the job, in my view. So I really find joy in that each day, and I'll add that because of the progress we've made, even with everything coming down from Washington, which is going to be it is already very difficult. I'm talking about the budget issues and other challenges, right? The cuts in Medicaid, the people who are going to suffer from SNAP nutrition cuts, right? Yeah. All of those things but we are going to fight like heck for the right people. And I know that there's some optimism on the ground with people because they know that I've been fighting for them for a number of years already.
All right. Well, thank you both for making time for us in very busy days. I think we all appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks, folks.